Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our coverage of our first orbital launch mission we're covering here in the year 2024. This mission going up from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing the commentary for the duration of this coverage. Hope you all had a wonderful and safe ringing in of the new year. Glad to have you with us for our first bit of live launch coverage of the new calendar year. Of course, our Stephen Young, our editor, running the technical operations of the broadcast this evening, and our photography team of Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane have the evening off as this is a California-based mission. That said, of course, if you'd like to follow them and keep up with their launch photography, we encourage you to do so on their social media on X, as they always post plenty of good launch content there. We're now approximately T minus 25 minutes and counting away from SpaceX's first launch. Tonight on deck is the Starlink 7-9 mission, not just your run-of-the-mill batch of Starlink satellites going up this evening, but among those Starlinks are the first six that will include the direct-to-cell technology that SpaceX founder Elon Musk discussed at a talk in Starbase in South Texas back in the summer of 2022, alongside the president and CEO of T-Mobile, their U.S. domestic partner in the direct to cell operations for that service. Of course, they've also added numerous global partners in this venture as well as they get ready to offer that additional service. This, of course, will be not only SpaceX's first orbital launch of the year, but naturally with that, the first Starlink-focused launch of 2024 as well. The current target T0 liftoff time, as we know it, is 7:44 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 10:44 Eastern Standard Time, and for those joining around the world, that's 03:44 UTC on January 3rd. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, there's a quick and easy way to do that. Just hit the like button, click subscribe, so you get the notifications when new videos are posted. And of course, you don't miss any of our live streams. So to all have done that, we really appreciate that. And of course, we are powered by our wonderful channel members. So I want to thank folks like David Skosen, who's just joined us at the pad leader level, and those like Stephanie B., one of our wonderful moderators, who's been a member for 9 months. Really appreciate the support with channel membership. It helps power all that we do here at Spaceflight Now. And of course, if you'd like to join in the conversation about this launch or whatever you're excited about coming up in 2024 on a launch front, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. That not only helps us provide more things to talk about in the run up to this launch, but also help support our coverage as well. We're now T minus 22 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. We know from SpaceX that propellant load is in fact underway, so that's a good sign. We're just approaching the point at which the big vent would happen in the countdown. That's the point where the fuel lines would be chilled in the strong back of the transporter erector, preparation for prop load of liquid oxygen onto the second stage of the Falcon 9 that starts at T minus 16 minutes. No, T minus 21 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. Want to thank one of our channel members who's been a channel member for now a full year, ringing in 1 year of channel membership, Rocket Profit. Thank you so much for your support, Rocket. They say, super happy to see SpaceX also launching cell service sats, another milestone. Yes, indeed. And to ring in the new year, one of our other channel members joining us once again for our first launch of the year, Callistia Lee. Good to see you again this evening, Callistia. Offering 10 Spaceflight Now memberships to some new folks. So to Wicked Code, Teo, Brian Sanchez, Adventures with the Weather Wizard, Laura Arul, Eden RTRR, and Sean C. Crystal Pebsworth and Jeff Hansen all were gifted memberships. So if you haven't already, be sure to thank Callistia for helping to do that. Really appreciate you, Callistia, for being so generous last year and kicking off the new year as well. And of course, to our another channel member, Artemis, for his great generosity this New Year's first launch with a $100 super chat. Thank you so much, Artemis, for that. Says, all right, same thing as usual, guys. If the chat can donate $100, I'll double it with another 200. Let's go, make science a reality. And can I get a what? I'll give you a what for that. Thank you so much, Artemis. Turning back to the mission at hand as we are T minus 19 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Talk a little bit about the timeline for the launch count as we get closer to that T0 planned liftoff time. Again, coming up at 7:44 p.m. Pacific time, locally there at Vandenberg. Of course, the count started at T minus 38 minutes with the startup propellant load. Of course, we got a few milestones already notched off. Started with the call for propellant load at T minus 38 minutes. Prop load started with both liquid oxygen and liquid grade kerosene or rocket grade kerosene being loaded on both the first and the second stages. Liquid oxygen started flowing aboard the first stage, that T minus 35-minute mark. Then at T minus 16 minutes, LOX load is going to be flowed onto the second stage of the Falcon 9. Ahead of that, though, is the big vent from the strong back, though, because the SpaceX feed has not begun, we won't actually see that event. But then coming up at T minus 7 minutes will be the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, protecting them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes out from liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. In T minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract begins away from the Falcon 9 rocket, reclines to an angle of about 13 degrees, leaning away from the Falcon 9, and it stays there until liftoff. So a little bit of a different strong back retract sequence than we were used to seeing out here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station or at NASA's Kennedy Space Center over at LC-39A. About 2 minutes out, liquid oxygen loading should be finished on the Falcon 9, at which point it will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX director gives their go for liftoff at 45 seconds out. Then the engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds. And if all engines are healthy, the flight computer gives the hold down clamps the command to release the Falcon 9 for liftoff at T0. Again, that T0 coming up at 7:44 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. 10:44 for those of us on the East Coast. Just under 16 minutes to the planned liftoff now. I want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. I want to welcome Pat Springer to channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome, Pat. Thank you so much for your support. To Rita Loy, one of our current channel members, for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Rita. Rita says, I'm looking forward to seeing this launch, separation, and second stage ignition. May be lucky enough to get the entry burn. Fingers crossed. Scrolling on down just because I know there were a couple more to mention here, I believe. See, Rocket Profit gifted 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thank you so much, Rocket. Really appreciate that generosity. Although the live feed is not showing me to whom those went. If you were one of those new 10 recipients of channel membership, be sure to thank Rocket Profit in the live chat if you haven't already. Now, T-minus 14 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. I want to briefly touch on the trajectory for today's mission, talk about where it will be going once it launches from Slick 4 East. This is SpaceX's pad over in Vandenberg Space Force Base. The Falcon 9 rocket will launch in a southeasterly trajectory along the west coast. Following stage separation, the first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. Of course, being that this is a Vandenberg launch, it will be using the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. The upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites, and the fairing halves will jettison just a bit downrange of the map as well, and we'll use one of its recovery ships to scoop up the fairing halves. We're now T-minus 12 and a half minutes away from liftoff. As you see SpaceX talking about the Starlink satellite system. As mentioned, this will be the first introduction of direct-to-cell capability for Starlink satellites. As we approach the final several minutes of the count, we're going to go ahead and listen into the SpaceX feed here and take us on through to the liftoff of the first Falcon 9 launch of 2024. Let's listen in.
Connectivity nearly everywhere.
Cellular providers using direct-to-cell will have reciprocal global access in all partner nations. In other words, for carriers who partner in direct-to-cell, their customers would stay seamlessly connected. In addition to T-Mobile in the US, these carriers include Optus in Australia, Salt in Switzerland, Rogers in Canada, One New Zealand, Entel in Chile and Peru, and KDDI in Japan.
As you can tell, this is huge. For those of us who have ever been in a place where you can't get signal, no, it can be super frustrating. Worst case, it can even mean the difference between life or death. In fact, about 90% of the Earth remains unreachable by traditional cell signals from any wireless company.
These dead zones have serious consequences for remote communities and those who travel and work off the grid. People in those areas are either left disconnected or resort to lugging around a satellite phone, which is incredibly expensive.
And pretty heavy. Starlink's direct-to-cell service will provide coverage nearly everywhere a customer can see the sky, bringing cell phone connectivity almost anywhere. And with partners like T-Mobile, we have a real chance to bring meaningful connectivity to people who need it most.
A little over a year ago, with our partner SpaceX, we announced a common vision to put an end to dead zones.
This technology did not exist a year ago. With the telecom expertise from T-Mobile, combined with the satellite technology from SpaceX, it's reality now.
For the first time ever, we will have connectivity regardless of where we are.
There's still 500,000 square miles of this country that aren't covered by any terrestrial network. That means we aren't connecting people in those areas. Nobody's connecting people in those areas.
So this is a massive milestone in our journey to bring coverage to areas that have not been possible to cover before.
The satellites are flying at 17,000 miles per hour, so you can imagine the challenges of trying to play ping pong as something is moving that fast.
We will keep on pushing the boundaries of this technology. We will start with messaging, and then we'll go from there to look at other opportunities in data and voice. That's definitely our goal.
The combination of what we're both good at is actually making each of us stronger and creating something together that is unprecedented.
The proof is in the pudding only after you've launched them in space. I'm overexcited about that. It's going to be a huge moment.
Bringing this service to the world is really going to change the trajectory of communications.
We're going to finally get towards fulfilling that ultimate mission of connecting our customers everywhere.
Go for launch.
The first 6 direct-to-cell satellites we're launching today will be used to test the service in the United States at first. Starlink's direct-to-cell capability will first enable text messaging, and then after more satellites are placed in orbit, voice and data coverage will be enabled.
Direct-to-cell will also connect to Internet of Things devices, like those used in remote areas for agriculture, environmental monitoring, and fire detection. Think about the impact on the safety around the globe, like people assisting in emergency situations, like firefighters and rescues along coastal waters. It can also help people like me who love hiking in national parks and other places where cell phones get no reception. I go there to relax and enjoy nature, so I want to stay offline. But knowing that I can connect in an emergency would provide a peace of mind for both me and my loved ones.
So let's talk about how this all works. First, we get those satellites to orbit, and that's what we're doing today. Once on orbit, the satellites will immediately connect to the Starlink constellation to provide global connectivity.
Direct-to-cell allows users to seamlessly connect to SpaceX satellites when they enter a remote area that currently has no cell service. It operates just like a mobile phone tower does on the ground, but from space. The service will work with any 4G LTE device, and most current smartphones are already compatible. So that's the latest news on Starlink's newest capability. If you want to stay up to date on direct-to-cell, go to direct.starlink.com.
And as we mentioned earlier, to enable direct-to-cell capability, we're adding new hardware to our Starlink satellites. With any changes to our satellites in orbit, SpaceX works closely with leading astronomers from around the world to better understand if there are any impacts to their observations, because we firmly believe in the importance of a natural night sky for all of us to enjoy.
While we do expect these first 6 Starlink direct-to-cell satellites to be a bit brighter than previous Starlink V2 minis, we plan to measure the brightness of the 6 and compare those measurements to our models. We'll then make adjustments to hardware and operations to honor our commitment to making our satellites as dim as possible.
Now back to today's launch. We are just about 7 minutes from liftoff. So far, everything is proceeding smoothly. We are watching the cumulus clouds overhead, and currently
Chill has started.
70% go for launch. And while we wait, let's take a closer look at the vehicle on your screen. Falcon 9 is a 2-stage rocket, and it also happens to be the first orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Falcon 9 stands about 230 feet tall, which is almost as tall as the Taj Mahal in India, and it's named after the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. The first stage, which is the tallest portion of the vehicle, provides 1.7 million pounds of thrust thanks to its 9 Merlin M1D engines. And actually, the number 9 in Falcon 9 refers to those 9 M1D engines on the first stage, but there are actually 10 engines on the rocket.
That's right. The second stage has that
Stage
10th
1,
engine.
RP1 load is complete.
That 10th engine, which is the Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine. This engine is similar to a first stage M1D engine, but has more redundancies as well as a larger nozzle that allows the second stage to perform in the vacuum of space. The first stage is what gets us out of the Earth's atmosphere and into space, and the second stage takes all the satellites to their targeted drop-off orbit. Now, on top of the second stage, you'll see that large barrel structure with a pointed nose. That is our payload fairing. It's composed of 2 halves, each made up of carbon fiber composite material. As a whole, the fairing protects our satellites until we're in the vacuum of space. Around 3 minutes into flight, once we've exited the atmosphere, we will jettison the fairing halves and attempt to retrieve them once they return to Earth. We want to jettison those fairings as soon as we can because the weight of the fairings actually decrease second stage performance.
And for reference, the payload fairing is about 40 feet tall with a 17-foot diameter. So to put that size into perspective, an average fire truck is about 40 feet long and 12 feet wide. So a fire truck would just fill up our payload fairing. As the fairing halves return to Earth, so will our first stage, which is set to land on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, and you can see it there on your screen, stationed out in the Pacific Ocean. Overall, SpaceX has reflown 231 boosters, but tonight
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
Tonight, our rocket will be making its first flight to space.
Now, for those of you who follow along, you'll already know that we typically end our Starlink webcasts following first stage landing and confirmation of a successful MVAC shutdown. Now, for updates on deployment, be sure to check out @SpaceX on X. Now, at this time, as we mentioned before, weather is about 70% chance of go. We have been watching the weather with some wind speeds and cumulus cloud rules. However, we are go for launch at this point in time. And as for the range is green, and they are ready to support liftoff just 4 minutes and 10 seconds, almost 10 seconds from now. We can actually see those clamp arms under the fairing have just opened. That's in preparation for strong back retraction. The strong back is also referred to as the TE or transporter erector. That's the large structure that you see there next to Falcon 9. It's now moving away by a couple degrees from the vehicle.
Yeah, and this TE does move away from the vehicle. This is in preparation to clear the pad for liftoff. It's moving a little bit away right now, but at T0 also move a significant amount more away from the vehicle as the vehicle lifts off. And the next milestone coming up once the TE is completely reclined for this phase will be at T-3 minutes. That will be liquid oxygen loading complete on the first stage. We are continuing to load LOX on the second stage as well, and that will wrap up at the T-2 minute mark. And once we hit that mark, that will complete propellant loading on Falcon 9 altogether. So just a few seconds away from LOX loading complete on stage 1.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And there's that call
and
out.
Stage 1 POGO.
LOX loading is complete on the first stage vehicle. That means that the first stage is fully loaded with RP1 and liquid oxygen. And again, we are awaiting liquid oxygen loading completion on the second stage, again, which will wrap up at the T-2 minute mark.
Now that LOX load is complete on the first stage, we will start to see some of those white clouds form around the vehicle. We'll see more of that occur after LOX load completes in about 20 seconds on the second stage. Totally normal. That's just liquid oxygen venting from the lines in the TE. Looking like that second stage LOX load should be wrapping up in just a couple of seconds here. As we said before, weather has been a watch item leading up to tonight's launch, but as of right now, we are still go for launch on the weather front. Everything continues nominally with our countdown so far for an on-time launch.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
There we heard that call out, letting us know that Falcon Stage 2 LOX load is complete. So at this point in time, Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with all of its propellants, equaling 1 million pounds of liquid fuel and oxygen. Now in about a few seconds, we'll hear a call out that Falcon 9 is in startup. That means that the onboard flight computers have taken over the launch countdown.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
All right. Right now, Stage 1 and Stage 2 are beginning to pressurize to their final pressure prior to launch.
LD is go for launch.
All right, that's the final go needed for tonight's launch, coming to us from our launch director. So at this point in time, at T-minus 35 seconds, all systems are go for liftoff of Falcon 9 with our Starlink satellites, including our first 6 direct-to-cell satellites. Let's listen in on the final count.
T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff of Falcon 9.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
At T plus 33 seconds, you are watching Falcon 9 accelerate our Starlink satellites out into space. We are throttling down our engines on the first stage vehicle, and that is in preparation for Max Q.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Good call-outs there. Max Q is the largest amount of stresses that the vehicle sees on ascent, so we do slow the vehicle down just a little bit in preparation for passing through Max Q. And that should be coming up.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
That should be coming up here in just under 10 seconds.
Max Q.
Great news, we have passed through Max Q.
All right, we're a minute and a half into...
MVAC engine chill has started.
That call there tells us that the engine on the second stage, that MVAC, has begun to flow some super chilled liquid oxygen through the engine to begin to bring that hardware down in temperature. We're less than a minute away from main engine cutoff, stage separation, second engine start. Those all happen really quickly, so don't blink. After that, we will jettison the fairings. At this point in time, the first stage is experiencing about 3.3 Gs. Beautiful view there on your screen of the vehicle as it's just lifted off from Vandenberg Space Force Base. It's now able to see that plume beginning to deplete as we are preparing for main engine cutoff.
Main engine cutoff. Stage separation confirmed.
All right, as you can see there on your screen, successful MVAC ignition there on your right-hand side. And before that, we had first stage engine shutdown and stage separation. We can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, the first stage grid fins starting to deploy. Those help steer the booster back to its precise landing.
Fairing separation confirmed.
All right, as you heard and just saw, successful fairing separation. That marks the 9th flight for one of those fairing halves and the 11th flight for the other. We, of course, will attempt to recover those fairing halves again to use on a future flight.
T plus 3 minutes and 48 seconds into flight, and right now you are looking at a view from the second stage vehicle, looking at our MVAC engine, glowing very brightly there. The first stage is making its way back down to Earth right now, and it does take 2 burns to make its way back down to our drone ship, which is, of course, I Still Love You, for tonight's scheduled landing. Those 2 burns coming up will be the entry burn, which is just about a couple minutes away from now, followed by the landing burn. The entry burn is where we reignite 3 of the 9 M1D engines on the vehicle, and that helps slow the stage down as it's re-entering back into the Earth's atmosphere. Then once we shut down those engines to conclude the entry burn, the atmosphere actually scrubs most of the velocity as it's making its way back to its landing zone. And then we use one final burn, a single engine burn. The center E9 engine will reignite, and that will help to slow the vehicle down just in time to touch down for landing. Again, the entry burn on the first stage is coming up in a little over a minute from now. And though you can't see it on your screen, on the bottom left-hand corner, you could see the telemetry of the Stage 1 vehicle, so you could see its speed and altitude. And for the second stage vehicle, on your right hand, the right bottom corner of your screen is where you can see the telemetry for Stage 2. We're about 1 minute away from the entry burn on the first stage vehicle.
Both vehicles following a nominal trajectory.
And good call-outs there. Both first stage and second stage are following nominal trajectories. Today's mission marks SpaceX's 296th overall launch, and it is the first of 2024. Again, it is carrying our Starlink satellites for this mission, including our first 6 direct-to-cell satellites. Now that entry burn on the first stage is coming up in just under 20 seconds. There you can see on your left-hand screen is a view from the first stage.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Good timing, we heard that call out, and now you can see on your screen those engines have relit on the first stage vehicle. This is just about a 20-second burn.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
There we heard that call out, as well as you could see that the engines have shut down on the first stage vehicle. That concludes the entry burn, the first of 2 burns that the first stage requires to make its way back to landing. The next burn is the landing burn, coming up in just about a minute and a half.
Stage 1 FTS has safed.
Everything continues to look good for both the first and second stage. If you've been following along with that altitude there on the left-hand side of your screen for stage 1, it actually kept increasing in altitude until about 4.5 minutes, T plus 4.5 minutes. As we can see, it's getting closer and closer. We are targeting a landing on our drone ship. Just read the instructions. Excuse me, of course, I Still Love You. And there we just heard the call out that the first stage is transonic, telling us that it is traveling near the speed of sound. Now only 6 kilometers above the ocean. So in about 12 seconds, we should see that landing burn ignite. That's a 1-engine burn designed to bring the booster.
Landing burn.
There we heard the call out, so we should see it here. There we go. So the first stage has lit 1 engine to prepare for landing.
Stage 2 FTS has safed.
We're targeting a landing on our drone ship, which you there
Landing light deploy.
see there now. Of course, I Still Love You.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
A beautiful nighttime shot there of a successful landing. That is Falcon 9 touching down for the 260th overall successful recovery of an orbital class rocket.
And there you go. The first successful launch for SpaceX of 2024. And also the first launch of 6 of their Starlink satellites featuring the direct-to-cell capability. As you heard earlier in the commentary, they're going to be testing out the functionality of their new direct-to-cell system using these first 6 satellites, which will be a bit brighter than traditional Starlinks, but they will work on decreasing the brightness as they roll out that capability over other Starlinks in the rest of the new year. According to SpaceX, they're going to be, well, according to an FCC filing, they've requested the ability to launch 7,500 satellites that feature the direct-to-cell modification in their Starlink satellite fleet. So quite a number of these are going to be rolling out. As mentioned, SpaceX is partnering with T-Mobile for this capability initially here in the United States, as well as multiple other partners around the world. This is just, of course, SpaceX's first launch of the year, also the first launch of the week. We do know that coming up tomorrow from right here in Florida, SpaceX is going to be launching the Ovzon 3 satellite. We'll, of course, have live launch coverage of that from the Cape when that happens. So be sure to come right on back here to YouTube. We'll have our live launch coverage starting right about an hour before the liftoff of that mission. We're also tracking potentially another Starlink satellite launch from the West Coast. We're looking forward to that possibly later in the week. We'll keep an eye to see if that, in fact, materializes. Before we go ahead and close out with our mission stats, do want to thank a number of folks who've been quite generous with their support this evening. Starting with one of our wonderful channel members, Artemis, with a couple of super chat donations here, a $200 one. Really appreciate that, Artemis. Artemis says, all right, we hit easy $100 in donations in terms of cash and memberships. Thanks so much, you guys. Happy New Year to all, and I wish everyone an incredibly awesome and happy 2024. Keep science alive, keep pushing, keep exploring, and always keep looking up. Wholeheartedly agree. And then comes back a little bit later with another $100 super chat. So thank you, Artemis, for helping us get off on a good foot in 2024. Also want to thank Mary Gilbert for a $2 super chat. Really appreciate that, Mary. Thank you so much. To Kevin Campbell with a $20 super chat. Really appreciate that, Kevin. Thanks for helping support us. So supporting X, I think SpaceX, from the right coast to the left coast. Yes, lots of SpaceX adoration across the country today as we kick off the orbital launch here from U.S. soil. Of course, ISRO had the honor of the first orbital space launch of 2024 with an X-ray observatory that they launched on January 1st. Artemis coming back with another $5 super chat. Says, who thinks we can do another 100 in the next 5 minutes? We'll see. We're coming in on the tail end of our stream coverage here, though we'll of course be back again, as I mentioned, tomorrow for the Ovzon 3 satellite launch. Lots to talk about there. We had the chance to actually sit down with one of the members of the Ovzon team, so you'll be hearing some of our conversation from that interview during our live launch coverage tomorrow. Want to thank Hill Street Blues for $2 super chat here. Thank you so much, Hill Street. They ask, what percentage of fairing halves are recovered? Well, SpaceX endeavors to recover and refurbish all of the fairing halves, although there are some that are occasionally unable to be recovered. The vast majority of them do get scooped up by the recovery vessels and brought back to their respective East and West Coast ports. And then, like with the boosters, they're evaluated for their future flight capabilities and then assigned as such. As of right now, though, National Security Space Launch Program missions are not reusing boosters. All of those missions get their own first flown first flown payload fairings for National Security Space Launch missions. But they are exploring fairing half reuse down the road. So thanks for the question, Hill Street. Gilbert Goobies Castro with a $3 super chat. Thank you so much, Gilbert. And closing out for now, Imleta joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Imleta. Appreciate your support here. And as we do with all of our missions that have gone off successfully, we want to give you an overview of the mission stats now that this has a successful launch and landing in the books here. This was the first flight of Falcon 9 booster 1082. This was SpaceX's 286th Falcon 9 launch to date. This was the first Falcon 9 launch of 2024. That's just a little typo there. This was the first SpaceX launch again of 2024, not 2023. This was SpaceX's 97th orbital launch in the last 365 days. The 61st SpaceX orbital launch from Slick 4 East. The 129th overall orbital launch from Slick 4 East. And of course, the first orbital launch from Vandenberg in 2023. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close out our live stream for the night. But before we do, want to briefly thank Marcus Gallegos with a gift of 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Marcus. Those going to Zephyr Wolf, Chris B8S, Buckets of Champagne, Ryan Davies, and George, all getting channel membership courtesy of Marcus. So if you haven't already, be sure to give him a thanks in the live chat. And as always, want to go ahead and thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat who've been helping to keep things moving in a copacetic way in the live chat there. So our kudos to Drumwolf, Astro Joe, and Stephanie B. Saw you all doing a lot of good work there in the live chat. Really appreciate you helping to coordinate some good conversations and talks this evening. So thanks to all of you and to all of our wonderful moderators who help us out launch by launch. And with that, we look forward to seeing you for tomorrow's live launch coverage, and to our new channel members now have access to 4K live streams of that launch that's coming up tomorrow, as is the case with all the launches from the Cape, in addition to access to member-only videos here on the YouTube channel and discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com. So with that, I want to go ahead and thank Stephen Young, our editor, who's running the technical aspects of the broadcast. We'll have our photographers, Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane, in action tomorrow. And I want to thank, most of all, you for spending part of your Tuesday evening with us from, excuse me, wherever you're watching from. Really appreciate you taking a little bit of time tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again here tomorrow. And lastly, just because it came in right underneath the wire, Ricky Ray with a $2 super chat asks, how much does it cost to fill that rocket? Quite a bit. I don't have an exact dollar amount on that, as the cost of launch shifts from mission to mission. There's not a hard and fast number on that, but it is in the multiple millions. That is certain. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Lots more to talk about with Ovzon 3 tomorrow. And of course, we are now less than a week away from the planned launch of the maiden flight of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket, tentatively scheduled for no earlier than January 8th. Of course, as is the case with all launches, we will be keeping a close eye on the weather as we get closer to liftoff, but we do have coverage on that leading up to the launch. Lots happening here at the Cape in the run up to that. We have the rollout of the Vulcan rocket from the vertical integration facility over at Space Launch Complex 41. That's coming up this Friday morning. We're working to get a live stream of that for you, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. There's also some conversations we're having with some of the key players involved with the astrobotic mission that we're going to be doing later in this week. And so be sure to bring you that coverage as we get through the rest of this week, get closer to the launch next week. So keep an eye on our social media channels, to our YouTube page here for lots of coverage on that and many other missions. And lastly, a week from this Friday, we are coming back with news from the press site. So be sure to get those notifications set. If you're not already subscribed to the Spaceflight Now channel, be sure to do so and ring the notification bell. If you haven't seen our first episode that we did last month, go ahead and check that out. That's on the channel right now, that we did back on the 15th. We'll be back on the 12th with our next episode, and we'll be kicking into our weekly cadence with news from the press site. So lots of great conversations to look forward to with all of the wonderful folks that help cover the world of spaceflight around the country and around the world. Looking forward to bringing you conversations with a lot of cool guests that we will announce as we get closer to each episode coming out. So look for those updates on our social as well. With that, I want to thank you once again for joining us for our live launch coverage of the Starlink 7-9 mission, the kickoff of SpaceX's orbital launch calendar year. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the evening, or if it's morning where you are, have a fantastic Wednesday. Be good to yourself, be good to others, and we will see you next time very soon. Good night.